My son texted me, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." I stared at my phone, my hands trembling as I read the message over and over again. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." The words pierced through me like a dagger. For years, I had been there for my son, through scraped knees, broken hearts, and countless sleepless nights. I raised him alone after his father left, pouring every ounce of love I had into him. Now, a single text reduced me to someone unwanted, someone to be kept away. I thought about the times I had babysat their little girl, the moments I cooked for them when they were struggling, the way I had tried to embrace his wife as my own daughter. Had I done something wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Tears streamed down my face as I tapped a reply, but quickly erased it. My pride wanted to stay silent, but my heart wanted to reach out. Finally, I wrote, "I understand. I hope dinner goes well. I love you." Hours passed, and I sat in the quiet, the weight of loneliness pressing on my chest. Then my phone buzzed again. It was my son. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I'll come over after dinner. I love you." The pain was still there, but so was the love. Even when the world shuts you out, a mother's heart never stops loving. Asterisk's parental sacrifice is often invisible to the world, but it is the very foundation upon which a child's life is built. In this story, the mother's sacrifices shaped her son's entire existence, yet they remained unspoken, taken for granted, and eventually forgotten by those who benefited the most. To truly understand the depth of her pain when she received that heartbreaking message, one must go back to the beginning, to the years when her sacrifices defined her life. When her son was born, she was young and full of dreams, but those dreams were swiftly redirected toward the tiny life in her arms. His father left shortly after, claiming he wasn't ready to settle down. She could have crumbled under the weight of single motherhood, but instead, she stood tall. She worked double shifts, often skipping meals to make sure her son was fed. Nights were long. She would rock him to sleep while her own eyes begged for rest. There were winters when the heater barely worked, yet she wrapped him in blankets and held him close to her chest, whispering promises that he would never feel alone. There were summers when she worked 2 jobs, in the morning at a bakery, in the evening cleaning offices, just to afford his school supplies. She missed countless social gatherings and moments for herself because her priority was always him. Every birthday, she made sure there was a cake, even if she had to stay up all night baking with the few ingredients she could afford. Every Christmas, there were presents under the tree, even if she had to pawn something precious to make it happen. He never knew the sacrifices behind those moments. He only saw the love, and that was enough for her Dot as he grew older. So did her sacrifices. When he wanted to join a sports team, she picked up extra hours to buy the uniform. When he needed tutoring, she skipped paying her own bills so he wouldn't fall behind in school. When he had his first heartbreak, she sat with him in silence, letting him cry, giving him comfort without judgment. Years rolled on, and eventually, he became a man. College acceptance letters arrived, and with them, new challenges. She worked tirelessly to support his education, while other parents relied on dual incomes. She managed everything alone, sometimes eating only 1 meal a day so she could send him money for books and living expenses. She never told him how much she struggled because she didn't want to burden him with guilt. Her love was pure, unconditional. When he graduated, she was the loudest person cheering in the audience, tears streaming down her face. She was proud, not because she had done it alone, but because he had become everything she dreamed he would be. She thought their bond was unbreakable, forged in the fire of all those shared years of sacrifice. When he met the woman who would become his wife, she welcomed her with open arms. She wanted her son to be happy, as she believed that loving his partner was an extension of loving him. She tried her best to be supportive, offering help when they struggled financially, babysitting when they had a child, and giving them space when needed. Yet, as time passed, she noticed a distance growing between them. His wife seemed to view her not as an ally, but as an outsider. Invitations to family events became less frequent. Conversations grew shorter, often polite, but distant. Still, she stayed silent, hoping things would improve. Then came the text message. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." The words sliced through her heart, reopening wounds she thought had healed. In that moment, all the sacrifices she had made felt invisible, the years of working herself to exhaustion. The night she spent crying silently so he wouldn't see her pain. The dreams she gave up so he could have his, none of it seemed to matter anymore. But even as tears fell, she remembered why she did it all. It wasn't for gratitude. It wasn't for recognition. It was because she loved her son with a love so deep it defied logic. Her sacrifices were not a transaction. They were a gift freely given. Still, the hurt was undeniable, because love does not erase the sting of rejection. That night, she sat alone in her small apartment, thinking about the years that had passed. She wondered if he remembered the nights she stayed awake just to make sure he was safe, the days she went without so he could have more, the countless times she chose his happiness over her own. She wondered if he knew how much she missed being part of his life. Her heart ached, but she also knew something powerful. Sacrifice is never truly wasted. Even if it goes unnoticed, it shapes the lives of those we love. Her son was a man. He was because of the foundation she built for him. Though he may have forgotten in that moment, a part of him would always carry her love. In the way he fathers his child, in the values he teaches, in the strength he shows during hard times. Sacrifice is silent, but it is eternal. It is the invisible thread that ties generations together. And while she may have been excluded from that dinner, she was never excluded from his heart. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that is the essence of parental sacrifice, giving everything without expecting anything in return, loving even when it hurts, and standing strong even when you feel unseen. And so, she wiped her tears and whispered to herself, "I did my best. I'd have no regrets, because love, when it is pure, doesn't keep score. It simply gives." Trust is the fragile thread that holds relationships together. It is built slowly over years of love, care, and shared experiences, but it can shatter in a single moment. For the mother in this story, the message she received from her son was not just a simple text. It was a heartbreaking betrayal of trust. It wasn't merely about being excluded from a dinner. It was about feeling cast aside by the very person she trusted with her heart. She had always trusted her son to stand by her side, just as she had stood by his. From the moment he was born, their lives were intertwined with a deep sense of mutual reliance. He relied on her for love, care, and stability, and she relied on him for purpose and joy. Through every stage of his life, she believed they shared a bond that could not be broken, one built on years of sacrifice and unconditional love. But trust is not only about love, it's also about loyalty. And on that night, when she read those cold words on her phone, she felt that loyalty slip away. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." The pain was not just in the message itself, but in the fact that it came from him. He could have defended her, could have chosen to honor the woman who had given him everything. Instead, he chose silence, and silence can be the loudest betrayal of all. Betrayal doesn't always come in the form of lies or deceit. Sometimes, it comes in the form of abandonment, when someone who should protect you instead allows you to be hurt. The mother had spent years nurturing her son, believing that one day he would be the one to protect her in her old age, to stand up for her when the world turned harsh. That belief was shattered when she realized he had allowed his wife's wishes to override his duty to her. She wasn't angry at his wife, hurt, perhaps, but not angry. She understood that relationships are complex, as she didn't expect to be the center of his world anymore, but she had expected to be treated with respect, to be valued for the role she played in his life. She had expected him to defend her when someone tried to push her away. Instead, the son chose the easier path, compliance, rather than standing up for his mother. He distanced himself from her, sending a text that would forever change the way she saw him. That single message conveyed something far more painful than words could express. You are not important enough to fight for. As she sat alone, clutching her phone, memories began to flood her mind. She remembered the countless times she had defended him when others criticized his choices. She remembered confronting teachers who underestimated him, standing up to bullies who made his childhood difficult, and even shielding him from judgmental relatives who doubted his potential. She had been his protector, his shield against the harshness of the world now. When she needed just a fragment of that loyalty in return, she was left exposed and alone. The feeling of betrayal cut deeper because it came without warning. Their relationship had been strained in recent months, but she never thought it would reach this point. She had trusted that their bond was unshakable, that no one, not even a spouse, could erase the years they had shared. Yet, in that single act of exclusion, she realized that her place in his life was no longer secure. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. The mother didn't confront her son immediately. Instead, she withdrew into herself, trying to process the pain. She asked herself endless questions. Was I too controlling? Did I interfere too much? Did I make him choose between me and her? Each question chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling like a burden instead of a blessing. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had never asked for much. She had never demanded his loyalty at the expense of his marriage. All she had wanted was to be treated with dignity, to be included in the small moments that made life meaningful, to be loved openly, not just in private texts when no one was watching. In the days that followed, she began to see betrayal not just as an act, but as a revelation. It revealed where she stood in her son's list of priorities. It revealed the fragility of their bond, and most painfully, it revealed that love alone is not always enough to hold a relationship together. It must be accompanied by respect and loyalty. She thought about calling him to express how deeply hurt she was, but she feared that doing so would push him further away. So she chose silence, not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. Sometimes, the greatest betrayal is realizing that the person you would do anything for is not willing to do the same for you. Yet, despite the pain, her heart refused to harden completely. She still loved her son, even if he had failed her in that moment. A mother's love is not easily extinguished. Over time, she found a small sense of peace in the knowledge that betrayal, while painful, is also a teacher. It teaches you who truly values you. It teaches you the importance of setting boundaries, and most importantly, it teaches you the strength to carry on even when those you love the most let you down. When her son eventually came to visit, guilt written across his face, she welcomed him with open arms, not because the betrayal didn't matter, but because she refused to let pain define their relationship forever. Forgiveness, she realized, was not about excusing what he had done, but about freeing herself from the bitterness it left behind. In the end, betrayal had changed her, but it had also changed him. He began to see how much his mother had endured for his sake, and how deeply his actions had wounded her. Sometimes, it takes losing someone's trust to truly understand its value, and though their bond would never be exactly the same, it became stronger in a new way, built on honesty, vulnerability, and the painful but necessary lesson that love must be protected, not taken for granted. Because trust, once broken, is not easily mended, but with effort, it can be rebuilt, one act of love at a time. Relationships are delicate, and when multiple bonds intertwine, especially within families, they can easily become complicated. The love between a mother and son is one of the purest forms of connection, built over years of sacrifice and shared memories. However, when a new relationship enters the picture, such as a marriage, the dynamics shift. These shifts can sometimes lead to conflict, not because of malice, but because of unspoken expectations, misunderstandings, and the struggle for balance. The mother in this story had always been there for her son. For years, they were each other's world, navigating life together through hardships and triumphs. When he introduced her to the woman who would later become his wife, she was genuinely happy. She welcomed her warmly, offering kindness and support, because she understood that her son's happiness was tied to this new relationship. In the beginning, everything seemed fine. They shared dinners, laughed over stories, and built what the mother believed was a mutual respect. But as time passed, she began to notice subtle changes. Invitations to family events became less frequent, and the conversations with her daughter-in-law grew shorter, sometimes even tense. She could sense that something was off, though neither party spoke openly about it. This is where the conflict of relationships began to quietly brew, not with an explosive argument, but with small, unspoken grievances that grew over time. The daughter-in-law may have felt uncomfortable with how close her husband was to his mother, to her. Perhaps it seemed like the mother still played the larger role in their decisions, or maybe she felt overshadowed by her presence. Instead of addressing these feelings openly, she chose distance as a solution, slowly excluding the mother from moments that once included her. On the other hand, the mother interpreted this distancing as rejection. She felt that her love and efforts to welcome her son's wife were being met with coldness. The more she tried to be helpful, offering advice, babysitting, giving gifts, the more it seemed to push her daughter-in-law away. What she meant as care may have been perceived as interference. This is the heart of many conflicts between in-laws. To women, both important in the life of one man, struggling to find where they fit. The son, caught in the middle, felt the tension but didn't know how to resolve it. Instead of addressing the conflict directly, he avoided confrontation, which only made things worse. The dinner invitation, or rather, the lack of it, became the breaking point. The text message he sent was not just about a meal. It was the culmination of months, maybe years, of unresolved tension. By telling his mother she was not invited, he sided, whether intentionally or not, with his wife. In doing so, he created a wound in his relationship with his mother. The conflict here is not rooted in hatred, but in competing loyalties. The son wanted to keep peace in his marriage, so he complied with his wife's wishes. At the same time, his mother expected him to stand up for her, to honor the years she had stood by him. His attempt to avoid conflict ended up creating a much larger one. Conflict of relationships often arises when boundaries are unclear. The mother believed she had a rightful place at the table, literally and figuratively, because she had raised him and was part of his life long before his wife entered it. The wife, on the other hand, likely believed that as the new family unit, she had the right to set boundaries and decide who was included in certain events. Both perspectives are valid, yet they clash when communication is absent. The mother spent days reflecting on the situation. She wondered if she had unknowingly overstepped boundaries, if her attempts to stay involved were seen as intrusions. She also wondered why her son didn't try to bridge the gap, to mediate between the two women he loved. The pain of being left out wasn't just about missing a meal. It was about feeling like an outsider in the very family she had worked so hard to create. The conflict between relationships is rarely about a single incident. It is about layers of emotion, pride, love, insecurity, and fear of losing connection. The daughter-in-law might have feared being compared to the mother, or that her husband's loyalty was divided. The mother feared being replaced, becoming irrelevant as her son built a new life. The son feared confrontation, so he chose silence, which only deepened the divide. Despite the tension, there is an opportunity for resolution. True healing comes not from avoiding conflict, but from addressing it with honesty and empathy. The mother eventually realized that approaching the situation with anger would only push her son further away. Instead, she chose patience. She allowed time to pass, hoping that her son would see the pain his actions caused and take steps to mend the relationship. When he finally did reach out, it was with an apology. He admitted that he had been afraid to stand up to his wife, worried that doing so would cause problems in his marriage. The mother listened, not with bitterness, but with understanding. She acknowledged his difficult position and reassured him that she never wanted to come between him and his wife. All she wanted was to remain part of his life, to be respected for the role she played. Over time, With careful conversations and mutual effort, the tension eased. The mother learned to step back when necessary, and the wife learned to see her not as a threat, but as someone who deeply loved her husband and their child. The son, having faced the conflict head-on, grew stronger. In both relationships, the conflict of relationships in this story is a reflection of a universal truth. Love is not a competition. A son can love his wife deeply without neglecting his mother. A mother can step back without feeling abandoned, and a wife can embrace her mother-in-law without feeling overshadowed. But this balance requires communication, respect, and the willingness to see things from the other person's perspective. In the end, the conflict that once seemed impossible to resolve became a turning point. It taught them all that relationships are not about choosing one over the other, but about finding harmony where everyone feels valued. The dinner they missed together became a painful memory, but it also became the catalyst for change. A reminder that even in conflict, love can lead the way to healing. Silent suffering is perhaps one of the most profound forms of pain because it is carried alone, hidden from the world. It is the pain that lingers in the heart, but rarely finds its way into words. For the mother in this story, silent suffering became her reality the moment she received that devastating text. She didn't scream, she didn't argue, and she didn't demand an explanation. Instead, she bore the hurt quietly, letting it gnaw at her heart in solitude. When she read the message, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there," she felt the air leave her lungs. The words were simple, but the impact was catastrophic. It wasn't just about a dinner invitation. It was about being excluded from her son's life, from moments that mattered. The rejection wasn't loud or dramatic. It was delivered in a few cold lines of text, leaving her to process it alone. She didn't call him to argue. She didn't send a message back filled with anger or accusations. Instead, she wrote only a short reply: "I understand. I hope dinner goes well. I love you." Her words were calm, but they masked the storm raging inside her. That night, she sat in the dim light of her living room, staring at the family photos on her wall. Each picture told a story of love and sacrifice. Her holding him as a baby, his first day of school, his graduation, the smile on his face on the day of his wedding. She traced her fingers over the glass, remembering every moment she had been there for him, every tear she had wiped away, every victory she had celebrated by his side. Now, the same son she had given everything for was telling her she wasn't wanted. The pain was overwhelming, but she kept it inside. She didn't want to burden anyone with her feelings, not even her closest friends. How could she explain to them that the person she loved most in the world had pushed her away? Silent suffering is a choice, but not because the pain is any less. It's a choice made out of love, dignity, and the fear of making things worse. The mother chose silence because she didn't want to drive a deeper wedge between herself and her son. If she confronted him angrily, she risked pushing him further away. If she spoke badly of his wife, she risked losing him completely. So, she held the pain inside, swallowing her tears whenever they threatened to fall. Each day after that, she went about her life as if nothing had happened. She smiled at neighbors, chatted politely with the cashier at the store, and even posted cheerful messages in the family group chat. No one saw the sadness behind her smile. At night, however, when the house was quiet, she allowed herself to cry softly, her tears soaking the pillow as she whispered prayers for strength. Silent suffering is also a form of resilience. Even as she hurt, she reminded herself why she was enduring this pain in silence, because she loved her son too much to let anger poison their relationship. She believed that time would heal the wound, that he would eventually realize the depth of her love and regret the way he had hurt her. In those quiet moments, she thought about all the times she had suffered silently before. When she was raising him alone and struggling financially, she never told him how hard it was. When she was sick but didn't want to worry him, she kept it to herself. This was just another trial, another burden to carry without complaint. It was not the first time she had hidden her pain to protect him, and it likely wouldn't be the last. What makes silent suffering so heartbreaking is that it often goes unnoticed by the very people who cause it. Her son, busy with his own life, didn't see the tears she shed in private. To him, her short, kind reply may have seemed like acceptance. He didn't know that behind those words was a mother who felt like her heart had been shattered. Sometimes, silent suffering is misunderstood as weakness, but in truth, it takes immense strength to endure pain without lashing out. The mother's silence was not a sign that she didn't care. It was proof that she cared too much. She valued her relationship with her son so deeply that she chose to absorb the hurt, rather than risk damaging what remained of their bond. Days turned into weeks, and the pain didn't disappear. It dulled over time, but it was always there, a lingering ache that reminded her of what had happened. Each time she saw pictures of family gatherings where she was absent, the wound reopened. Still, she stayed quiet. She never mentioned the incident to her son again, not because it didn't matter, but because she loved him enough to let go of her pride eventually. Her son began to notice the distance. He sensed that something had changed, that his mother's usual warmth was now tinged with sadness. It took him time to understand that her silence wasn't acceptance, it was suffering. When he finally realized it, guilt consumed him. One evening, he came to visit her unannounced. She opened the door, surprised but happy to see him. As they sat together, he confessed that he had been wrong. He admitted that he had put her in an unfair position and failed to defend her when she needed him most. The words she had longed to hear poured out, and though they didn't erase the pain, they softened it in that moment. She understood something profound. Silent suffering can sometimes speak louder than words. Her quiet endurance had allowed her son to come to his own realization. It had preserved their relationship when anger could have destroyed it. Silent suffering, though painful, can be transformative. It teaches patience, strength, and the ability to love even when love is not returned in the way you hoped. The mother's pain was real, but it also gave her a deeper understanding of unconditional love. She didn't suffer silently because she was powerless. She suffered silently because her love was powerful enough to endure the hurt in the end. Her suffering was not in vain. It became the bridge that brought her son back to her, not through confrontation, but through the quiet force of a mother's love. Her silence had spoken volumes, and when he finally listened, their bond grew stronger than before. Because sometimes the deepest pain is carried in silence, and the loudest message is delivered without a single word. Loneliness is not simply being alone. It is the aching feeling of being unwanted, forgotten, or left out. It's an emptiness that lingers in the heart, even in a room full of people. For the mother in this story, loneliness became a shadow that followed her everywhere after she received a heartbreaking text. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." The moment she read those words, she felt something deep inside her break. She had experienced solitude before. Raising her son as a single mother meant many nights spent alone, but this loneliness was different. This wasn't the loneliness of being physically alone. It was the loneliness of being emotionally abandoned by the one person she thought would always include her. She sat in her chair that evening, staring at the empty seat across from her. That seat had once been filled with laughter and conversation, her son telling her stories about his day, sharing meals, joking about small things. Now, that seat was cold and unoccupied, a cruel reminder of the distance that had grown between them. Loneliness is often silent, but it screams in the small details. It's in the way she set the table for one, even though her heart wished she could set it for two. It's in the way she glanced at her phone, hoping for a message that never came. It's in the way she looked out the window, watching other families walk together while she stood there alone. Each day, she went through the motions of life, cooking for herself, watching television, watering her plants, but everything felt empty. The house was quiet, too quiet. There was no sound of footsteps rushing in, no voice calling out, "Mom, I'm home." The silence was deafening, and with every passing day, it seemed to grow louder. Loneliness also lives in memories. She found herself replaying old moments. In her mind, the times when her son would curl up beside her on the couch, the times he would call just to say he missed her, the times he would seek her advice when life felt overwhelming. Those memories warmed her heart, but they also deepened the pain because they reminded her of what she had lost. She wondered if he missed her the same way. Did he ever think about the nights they stayed up talking until dawn? Did he remember the sacrifices she made for him, the love she poured into every corner of his life? Or was she just a figure from his past, someone he respected but no longer needed? These questions haunted her in the stillness of her lonely nights. Loneliness is cruel because it distorts the way you see yourself. The mother began to question her worth. Was she too clingy? Did she make mistakes that pushed her son away? Was she truly unwanted, not just at that dinner, but in his life altogether? The doubts gnawed at her, making her feel small and invisible. At times, she tried to fill the void. She joined community events, talked to neighbors, even started hobbies she had once loved. But no matter what she did, the loneliness remained, because what she missed was not just company. It was the presence of her son, the connection only he could give her. The dinner she was excluded from became a symbol of her isolation. While they gathered around a table filled with food, laughter, and warmth, she sat in her own home with a simple meal, eaten in silence. The contrast was painful. She didn't resent their happiness. She only wished she could share in it. Loneliness also has a way of magnifying the smallest gestures. When her son sent her a brief message days later, "Hope you're doing okay, Mom," it felt like a drop of water in a desert. She replied with love, hiding her true emotions, because she didn't want to seem needy. But deep down, she longed for more than a text. She longed for his presence. As time passed, she began to accept her loneliness, not as something she deserved, but as something she had to endure. She learned to live with it, the way one learns to live with an old wound that never fully heals. She found small comforts: a cup of tea by the window, the warmth of the sun on her face, the sound of birds in the morning. These moments didn't erase the loneliness, but they made it bearable. Yet, even in her loneliest moments, her love for her son never wavered. She thought about him every day, prayed for his happiness, and hoped that one day he would see how much she missed him. Her love was stronger than the pain, and it kept her going even when loneliness threatened to overwhelm her. The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, as she sat alone watching an old movie, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find her son standing there, holding a small bouquet of flowers. His eyes were filled with guilt and sadness. Without saying a word, he hugged her tightly, as if he could feel the loneliness she had carried all this time. In that embrace, she felt the weight of her isolation begin to lift. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. Her heart, though still bruised, felt a flicker of warmth return. He apologized, and though it didn't erase the weeks of loneliness, it reminded her that she was still loved, still wanted. Loneliness, as painful as it is, can teach profound lessons. It teaches patience, because waiting for love to return is an act of faith. It teaches resilience, because surviving without the people you need the most proves your inner strength. And it teaches the value of connection, because when it is restored, it feels more precious than ever before. For the mother, loneliness was both her greatest pain and her greatest teacher. It showed her how deep her love ran and how strong she could be, even in the darkest nights. And when her son finally came back to her, she realized that the bond they shared, though tested by distance and silence, had not been broken. In the end, loneliness was not the end of her story. It was a chapter, a painful one, but one that made the eventual reunion even more meaningful, because when love returns after loneliness, it shines brighter than ever. Unconditional love is a force that defies pain, betrayal, and even rejection. It is the kind of love that gives without expecting anything in return, that forgives without demanding apologies, and that endures even when it is not reciprocated. For the mother in this story, unconditional love was the core of who she was. It guided her every decision, shaped her sacrifices, and ultimately allowed her to continue loving her son, even after he heard her dot when she received the message, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." The pain was overwhelming. It would have been easy to let anger take over, to respond with resentment, or to cut ties out of self-protection. But a mother's love is different. Even in the face of rejection, her first instinct was not to retaliate, but to protect her son from guilt and conflict. That is why her reply was simple, filled with warmth instead of bitterness. "I understand. I hope dinner goes well. I love you." This response was not weakness, it was strength. It was the strength of unconditional love, a love that chooses to remain soft even when the world is hard. Unconditional love begins long before a child can understand it. The mother had loved her son from the moment she carried him in her womb. She loved him when he took his first breath, when he cried through sleepless nights, when he stumbled and fell while learning to walk. Her love was not based on what he could give her in return. It was rooted in the pure joy of seeing him grow and thrive out as he grew older. Her love did not waver. It stayed constant through his mistakes, his teenage rebellions, and his moments of selfishness. She forgave easily because she understood that he was learning, just as she was learning to let go. Even when he left home to build his own life, her love followed him silently, like an invisible shield protecting him from a far dot. When he got married, her love expanded to include his wife. She tried to embrace her as part of the family, offering help, care, and kindness. She gave her time, her effort, and her heart without expecting much in return. Even when she sensed tension and coldness, she chose patience over confrontation because her love for her son was too strong to allow resentment to grow. This is the nature of unconditional love. It gives and gives even when it receives little back. It forgives slights, overlooks misunderstandings, and holds on even when everything else seems to fall apart. The text message tested the very limits of that love. It would have been understandable if the mother had allowed anger to take root. She could have sent a scathing reply, or she could have distanced herself to protect her heart. But instead, she chose to continue loving him even from a distance. Her unconditional love reminded her that relationships are not perfect. People make mistakes sometimes. They hurt the ones they love most without realizing the depth of the pain they cause. She understood that her son was caught in a difficult position, torn between his wife and his mother. Though his choice hurt her, she still loved him because her love was not based on his behavior. It was based on who he was to her, her child. Unconditional love is not blind. It sees the flaws, the failures, the hurtful moments, and loves anyway. The mother did not ignore the pain of being excluded. She felt it deeply, cried over it, and carried it in her heart. But she refused to let that pain poison her love. Instead, she transformed it into patience, waiting for the day when her son would understand how much she valued their relationship. Even during the days of silence, she prayed for him. She wished him happiness, health, and peace. When she saw pictures of him with his family, she smiled through her tears, happy that he was building a life, even if she wasn't part of every moment. This is what unconditional love does. It celebrates the happiness of others, even when it comes at a personal cost. Over time, her quiet love began to speak louder than words. Her son started to feel the weight of his actions. He remembered all the times she had been there for him, all the sacrifices she had made, all the moments she had loved him without conditions. He realized that she had never asked for much, only to be included, only to be loved in return. The guilt of hurting her began to grow, and with it, the desire to make things right. When he finally came to her, flowers in hand, and said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you," her heart swelled with a mix of relief and forgiveness. She didn't lecture him, didn't hold the pain over his head. Instead, she embraced him, because that is what unconditional love does. It forgives the moment it is asked to. This experience taught her something profound. Unconditional love is not about never feeling hurt. It is about loving despite the hurt. It is about choosing compassion over resentment, empathy over anger, and forgiveness over pride. It is the love that says, "You hurt me, but you are still mine, and I will still love you," in a world where relationships often come with conditions, where love is given only when it is convenient, or only when it is reciprocated. Unconditional love stands out as rare and precious. It is the love of a parent who continues to love their child no matter what, of a mother who holds her son in her heart even when he pushes her away. In the end, unconditional love became the very thing that healed their relationship. It was her patience, her quiet strength, and her refusal to give up on him that drew her son back to her. Their bond, though tested, became stronger because it was built on something deeper than just shared experiences. It was built on a love that could not be broken. The mother's unconditional love serves as a reminder to all of us. True love does not keep score. It does not hold grudges. It does not demand perfection. It simply loves fully, fiercely, and forever. For her, loving her son unconditionally was not a choice. It was who she was. And because she loved him that way, she could endure the pain, forgive the hurt, and welcome him back with open arms. Unconditional love is not easy, but it is the most powerful force there is. It can heal wounds, rebuild trust, and bring people back together even after they have drifted apart. The mother's story is proof of this, proof that when love is unconditional, it survives anything. Empathy and understanding are the quiet bridges that connect hearts. Even when circumstances threaten to pull them apart, they allow people to see beyond their own pain and step into the shoes of another, to consider not just what they feel, but why the other person might be acting a certain way. For the mother in this story, empathy became both her shield and her strength. It allowed her to process the pain of rejection not with bitterness, but with compassion, even toward the very people who hurt her. When she received the message, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there," her first reaction was heartbreak. The sting of being excluded by her own son was sharp and immediate. Tears filled her eyes as she felt as if the ground beneath her feet had crumbled. But as the initial wave of pain subsided, she began to think deeper. Instead of asking, "Why would they do this to me?" she asked, "What must they be feeling to make this decision?" This shift in perspective was not easy. It required immense emotional strength to look past her own hurt. Yet, as a mother, empathy was second nature to her. She had spent her entire life trying to understand her son's feelings when he cried as a child, when he rebelled as a teenager, and when he struggled as an adult. Now, even in her pain, she tried to understand him once more. Empathy allowed her to consider her daughter-in-law's point of view. Perhaps she felt insecure, or maybe she believed that including the mother at dinner would create tension. Maybe there had been misunderstandings or unspoken conflicts that she wasn't even aware of. Instead of labeling her daughter-in-law as cruel, the mother thought she must have her reasons. This didn't excuse the hurt, but it softened the bitterness that could have easily taken root. She also thought about her son's position. He was caught between two women he loved deeply, his wife and his mother. It must have been difficult for him to balance both relationships, especially if he felt pressure to choose sides. She realized that his message, though painful, was likely not written with malice. It was written by someone trying to keep peace in his own home, even at the expense of his mother's feelings. Understanding doesn't erase hurt, but it transforms it. Instead of feeling angry, she felt a quiet sadness mixed with compassion. She remembered times in her own life when she had made decisions that hurt others, not because she wanted to, but because she felt trapped. Her son was in that position now. He didn't want to hurt her, but he didn't know how to stand up for her either. By practicing empathy, the mother prevented herself from becoming resentful. She could have easily let the pain turn into anger, blaming her daughter-in-law, accusing her son of betrayal, but anger would only create walls, while empathy allowed her to keep her heart open. This open heart was what ultimately saved their relationship. Empathy also allowed her to examine her own actions. She thought back on moments when she might have unintentionally overstepped boundaries. Had she given too much advice when it wasn't asked for? Has she inserted herself into their decisions more than she should have? These reflections were not meant to place blame on herself, but to understand the situation fully. She realized that relationships require balance, and perhaps she needed to adjust how she approached theirs. This level of self-awareness is only possible through empathy. Instead of focusing solely on her own pain, she asked hard questions and considered perspectives other than her own. It was this ability to see the bigger picture that kept her from becoming bitter and withdrawn in the days that followed. Her empathy guided her actions. She didn't send messages filled with guilt or anger. Instead, she sent her son words of love, showing that she understood his position. When they eventually spoke, she listened more than she talked. She didn't accuse him or his wife. She simply shared how she felt, giving them room to explain their side as well. Her son was deeply moved by this approach. He had expected her to be angry, to scold him, or to demand explanations. Instead, she offered understanding, which disarmed his defenses and allowed him to speak honestly. He admitted that he had been afraid that standing up to his wife would cause conflict in his marriage, and afraid that including his mother would lead to tension at the dinner. This conversation would not have happened if she had approached the situation with hostility. It happened because she met the pain with empathy, creating a safe space for healing. Empathy also changed how she saw her daughter-in-law. Instead of seeing her as someone who had taken her son away, she began to see her as a young woman navigating her own insecurities and fears. She remembered what it was like to be a wife herself, trying to establish a home and set boundaries. She realized that her daughter-in-law might not fully understand the depth of a mother's bond, but that didn't mean she was malicious. It simply meant she was human. Through empathy, the mother decided to step back where necessary, giving them space to grow as a couple while still being present as a supportive figure. She didn't force her way into their lives, but she didn't shut herself out either. She found a balance, being there when needed and stepping aside when it was better for their peace. Over time, her empathy began to influence her son and his wife as well. They saw how she responded to hurt with grace, how she chose understanding over resentment. This inspired them to reflect on their own actions. Her daughter-in-law, who once felt defensive, began to open her heart more. Her son, who once felt caught in the middle, found the courage to speak up for his mother while maintaining harmony in his marriage. Empathy, when practiced consistently, has a ripple effect. It softens hearts, dissolves misunderstandings, and replaces conflict with connection. The mother's willingness to see beyond her own pain created a pathway for reconciliation that might not have existed otherwise. In the end, empathy and understanding became the keys to healing. They allowed the mother to keep loving her son without conditions, to forgive without forgetting, and to rebuild the bond that had been strained. They also helped her grow as a person, teaching her that even in moments of hurt, choosing compassion is always the right path. The dinner she missed became a painful memory, but it also became a turning point. It taught all of them that relationships are not about winning or losing, but about understanding each other's hearts. Because when people truly understand one another, even the deepest wounds can heal. The mother's story is a powerful reminder that empathy is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to look past your own pain and see the world through someone else's eyes. It takes wisdom to respond with love when you have every reason to respond with anger. And in the end, it is empathy that saves relationships, because it allows love to flourish even in the midst of hurt. Life is a series of choices, some small and insignificant, others heavy with consequences. The choices we make define who we are and shape the relationships we hold dear. In this story, the son's decision to send that message, "You weren't invited to dinner, my wife doesn't want you there," carried immense weight. Though it was just a few words tapped into a phone, it had the power to wound deeply, to create distance where closeness once thrived. The son may not have realized how heavy that choice would feel in hindsight. At the moment, it seemed easier to comply with his wife's wishes rather than confront her or stand up for his mother. Choosing to send the text was his way of avoiding conflict, But in doing so, he unknowingly caused a conflict of a different kind, one that pierced his mother's heart. This is the nature of choices. We make them quickly, but their effects can linger far longer than we anticipate. The son's decision revealed his struggle between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his mother. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was a choice nonetheless, and its weight would follow him long after. The dinner was over. For the mother, the weight of his choice was crushing. It wasn't just about being excluded from a meal. It was about realizing that, when faced with a decision, her son had not chosen her. This wasn't a matter of ownership or competition. It was about love, respect, and acknowledgement. She felt as though she had been placed at the bottom of his priorities, and that realization hurt deeply. Every time she replayed the text in her mind, she felt the weight of it pressed down on her chest. It wasn't anger that consumed her, but sadness. She wondered, did I raise him to turn his back on me so easily? Did I fail as a mother somewhere along the way? These questions tormented her, making the weight of his choice even heavier. The son, too, eventually felt the burden of what he had done. At first, he convinced himself that he had made the right decision to keep peace in his home. He told himself his mother would understand, that she was strong enough to handle it. But as the days passed, the guilt began to creep in. He remembered all the sacrifices she had made for him, all the time she had chosen him over everything else, and now, when it was his turn to choose, he had failed her. This is the thing about choices. They reveal our values. They show what we are willing to stand for and what we are willing to compromise. The son's choice showed that. In that moment, he prioritized avoiding conflict over protecting his mother's feelings. It wasn't an easy realization for him to face. The weight of choices also falls on relationships as a whole. His decision didn't just hurt his mother, it strained the bond they shared. A relationship is like a fragile glass, strong enough to hold years of love, but vulnerable enough to crack under the pressure of a single wrong move. His text created a crack. It didn't shatter the bond entirely, but it weakened it, making it fragile and requiring careful effort to repair. The mother, despite her pain, also had choices to make in the aftermath. She could have chosen anger, cutting him off to teach him a lesson. She could have chosen bitterness, holding the pain over his head for years. But she chose something different. She chose love. Her decision to respond with understanding rather than resentment allowed the relationship to survive. Every choice comes with consequences, and those consequences teach us valuable lessons. For the mother, the consequence of her choice to remain kind was healing. By refusing to let bitterness grow, she kept the door open for reconciliation. For the son, the consequence of his choice to exclude her was guilt and regret, feelings that eventually pushed him to reflect and make amends. Over time, he realized that avoiding conflict in one area of life only creates conflict in another. By not addressing the underlying issues with his wife, he had allowed those issues to spill over into his relationship with his mother. He learned that real peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from honest conversations, even when they are difficult. The weight of choices also teaches us that no decision exists in isolation. The son's text was influenced by many factors: his wife's feelings, his desire for harmony, his fear of confrontation. Likewise, his mother's reaction was shaped by years of love, sacrifice, and the expectations she held for her relationship with him. Choices are like ripples in water. They spread outward, affecting everything around them. When the son finally came to his mother to apologize, he acknowledged the weight of his actions. "I made the wrong choice, Mom," he said with tears in his eyes. "I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I hurt you in the process. I should have handled it differently." His honesty lifted part of the burden, but not all of it. The weight of choices lingers because trust, once shaken, takes time to rebuild. The mother forgave him not because the choice didn't matter, but because she understood that everyone makes mistakes. She knew that love is stronger than a single bad decision. Her forgiveness lifted the weight from his shoulders, allowing him to breathe again, and it softened the heaviness in her own heart. From that day on, The son became more mindful of the choices he made. He learned to stand up for his mother while also respecting his wife, finding a balance that honored both relationships. He realized that every decision, no matter how small, carries weight, and that choosing with love and courage is always worth the effort. This experience also changed the daughter-in-law. When she saw how her decision had affected her husband and his mother, she began to reflect on her own choices. She realized that excluding his mother didn't strengthen their marriage. It only created division. Over time, she softened, allowing room for healing and rebuilding trust. The story ultimately shows that the weight of choices is not just about the pain they cause, but the growth they inspire. The painful dinner exclusion became a lesson for everyone involved. For the son, to choose courage over fear. For the mother, to choose love over bitterness. And for the wife, to choose inclusion over exclusion. In the end, the weight of choices became the very thing that strengthened their relationships. Though the burden was heavy at first, it forced them to confront their flaws, communicate openly, and make better decisions in the future. Life is full of moments where we must choose between pride and love, between avoidance and confrontation, between resentment and forgiveness. The mother story is a testament to the fact that while choices can break us, they can also rebuild us, shaping stronger bonds than ever before. Because in the end, the weight of choices doesn't just define the moment, it defines the people we become. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships. It has the ability to heal wounds, mend broken bonds, and turn pain into strength. But forgiveness is not easy. It requires letting go of resentment, choosing love over anger, and finding peace within yourself even when you've been deeply hurt. For the mother in this story, forgiveness became the path to healing, not only for her relationship with her son, but for her own heart. When she received the message, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there," she felt an intense wave of pain. At that moment, she could have easily chosen to hold a grudge. She could have let the bitterness fester, blaming her son and daughter-in-law for making her feel unwanted. But deep down, she knew that holding on to anger would only poison her own heart. Forgiveness didn't happen instantly. In the first few days after the text, she cried herself to sleep, wondering what she had done to deserve such treatment. She replayed the situation over and over in her mind, each time feeling the sting of rejection all over again. But with every tear, she also prayed for strength, for clarity, and for the ability to forgive. She knew that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about freeing herself from the chains of pain. The first step in her healing process was understanding. She tried to see the situation not only from her perspective, but also from her son's and his wife's. This empathetic reflection allowed her to soften her heart. She realized that her son had not acted out of malice, but out of fear of conflict, fear of upsetting his wife. Likewise, she considered that her daughter-in-law might have had her own insecurities that led to her actions. Understanding doesn't justify hurtful behavior, but it creates room for forgiveness. It allowed the mother to release the anger she initially felt and replace it with compassion. Forgiveness also required her to confront her own pride. Pride can be a heavy obstacle when someone you love has wronged you. It whispers, they should come to you first. They should beg for your forgiveness. But the mother knew that waiting for an apology would only prolong her suffering. Instead, she chose to forgive silently, even before her son had the courage to say sorry. This inner decision was powerful. By forgiving him in her heart, she freed herself from the bitterness that could have consumed her. She no longer allowed the incident to control her emotions. When she thought about her son, she still felt pain, but it was no longer accompanied by anger. Instead, she felt a quiet hope that one day they would heal together. Healing, however, is a process. Forgiveness was the first step, but it took time for her heart to fully recover. Every time she saw photos of family gatherings she wasn't invited to, the wound reopened slightly. But instead of dwelling on the pain, she reminded herself of the love she still had for her son. She reminded herself that forgiveness was not a one-time act, but a daily choice to let go of resentment. As weeks turned into months, her heart grew. Later, she began to focus on her own happiness, reading books she loved, visiting friends, and finding joy in small things. Healing does not mean forgetting what happened. It means reclaiming your peace despite what happened. The turning point came when her son finally reached out to her in person. He showed up at her door one evening, his eyes filled with remorse. Before he even spoke, she could see the guilt weighing him down. When he said, "Mom, I'm sorry for what I did," tears filled her eyes. She didn't respond with anger or a list of grievances. Instead, she opened her arms and said, "I forgave you a long time ago." At that moment, both of them felt the healing power of forgiveness. Her words lifted the burden from his heart, and his apology sealed the cracks that had formed between them. The pain didn't disappear completely in an instant, but it no longer defined their relationship. Forgiveness also brought healing to the relationship with her daughter-in-law. At first, it was difficult to face her without resentment, but over time, as they spent more moments together, the mother chose to approach her with kindness rather than hostility. She offered help when needed, complimented her efforts, and slowly rebuilt trust. The daughter-in-law, in turn, began to see the mother not as a threat, but as an ally. Healing spread across the entire family because forgiveness opened the door for new beginnings. The mother's journey of forgiveness also taught her son an important lesson. He learned that mistakes do not define a relationship. What defines is the willingness to admit those mistakes and make things right. He realized how strong his mother's love truly was, a love that forgave without hesitation and healed without demanding anything in return. This realization changed him, making him more protective and appreciative of her presence in his life. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as weakness, but the truth is, it takes incredible strength to forgive. It takes strength to let go of the anger that feels so justified. It takes strength to love someone who has hurt you, and it takes strength to choose peace over pride. The mother's story is a testament to this strength. Her ability to forgive not only healed her relationship with her son, but also brought her inner peace. Healing is not just about repairing relationships with others. It's also about repairing the relationship you have with yourself. The mother no longer saw herself as a victim of rejection. She saw herself as a strong woman who had endured pain and turned it into wisdom. She felt proud of her ability to love unconditionally, even when it wasn't easy. As time went on, the family dinners became different. There was a newfound respect, a deeper connection that hadn't been there before. The memory of the hurtful message never completely disappeared, but it became just that, a memory, no longer a wound, no longer a source of pain, but a reminder of how far they had come. The healing was complete when she could think about the incident without feeling sadness. Instead, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, gratitude for the reconciliation, and gratitude for the love that has survived the storm. In the end, forgiveness and healing transformed what could have been a permanent fracture into an unbreakable bond. The mother's decision to forgive saved her relationship with her son and allowed love to flow freely once again. Her story proves that forgiveness is not about forgetting the hurt, but about choosing to move beyond it. Because when forgiveness takes root, healing blossoms, and when healing blossoms, love grows stronger than ever. Relationships, no matter how strong, are vulnerable to moments of strain. A single misunderstanding or hurtful action can create cracks that seem impossible to repair. However, when love is genuine, bonds can be rebuilt slowly, carefully, and with effort from both sides. In this story, after the painful exclusion from the family dinner, the mother and son faced the challenge of rebuilding their connection. What began as a fragile attempt to mend what was broken eventually became a journey of deeper understanding, renewed respect, and stronger love. The process of rebuilding began with acknowledgement. When her son finally came to her, guilt evident in his eyes, he admitted his mistake. "Mom, I shouldn't have sent that message. I hurt you." and I'm sorry. These words were not just an apology. They were the first stone laid in the foundation of their renewed bond. Without acknowledgement, healing would have been incomplete. His willingness to take responsibility showed that he valued their relationship enough to confront his own actions. For the mother, hearing those words was both painful and comforting. Painful because it reminded her of the rejection she had endured, but comforting because it meant her son understood the depth of the hurt he had caused. Forgiveness had already taken root in her heart, but this conversation watered the seed of reconciliation. Rebuilding a bond requires effort, and effort was exactly what her son put forth in the days that followed. He began to call more often, asking about her day and sharing parts of his own life. These were not grand gestures, but small, consistent actions that slowly bridged the emotional distance that had grown between them. He invited her over for tea, dropped by unannounced just to say hello, and made sure she felt included in the milestones of his life again. The mother responded with warmth, never using the past against him. She didn't bring up the painful text in moments of anger, nor did she make him feel as though he was forever indebted to her. Instead, she met his efforts with love and openness, allowing their bond to strengthen naturally. An important part of rebuilding was establishing new boundaries. The mother realized that part of the tension had stemmed from misunderstandings about roles in their evolving relationship. She had to step back at times to allow her son and his wife to grow together as a couple, even when it meant holding back her opinions. In return, her son learned to balance his loyalty to his wife with his responsibility toward his mother. He became more mindful of including her without compromising his marriage. This mutual respect created a healthier dynamic. The mother no longer felt like an outsider, and the son no longer felt torn between the people he loved. They began to communicate openly, addressing concerns before they could fester into conflicts. The daughter-in-law also played a role in this rebuilding. Initially, there was tension, but as the mother extended kindness and empathy, the younger woman began to soften. She started to see the mother not as competition for her husband's affection, but as an ally who genuinely wanted the best for them. Gradually, they shared moments of connection, cooking together, exchanging thoughtful messages, and even laughing during family gatherings. These small acts of reconciliation strengthened the entire family bond. The process wasn't without challenges. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, and the mother felt the sting of being left out in subtle ways. There were times when the son worried that he might not be doing enough to make things right. But each challenge became an opportunity to rebuild stronger. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, they began to face them head-on, using honesty and love as their tools. As months passed, the relationship grew even closer than it had been before the conflict. The pain of the past transformed into a shared lesson. Both mother and son learned the value of clear communication, empathy, and unconditional love. The mother understood that rebuilding a bond wasn't about returning to the way things were, but about creating something new, something more resilient. Family dinners, once a source of pain, became moments of healing. The first time she was invited back, she felt nervous. Would it feel awkward? Would the memories of rejection overshadow the evening? But as soon as she stepped into her son's home and saw the warmth in his eyes, the tension melted away. The dinner was filled with laughter, shared stories, and a comforting feeling of belonging. It was as if the bond had not only been restored, but had grown stronger through the struggle. Rebuilding bonds is also about gratitude. The son began to express his appreciation more openly. He thanked his mother for her patience, her forgiveness, and her unwavering love. He reminded her of how much she meant to him, not just in words, but in actions, by being present, by defending her when necessary, and by making sure she always felt valued. The mother, in turn, expressed her gratitude for his efforts. She didn't take his gestures for granted, knowing how difficult it had been for him to navigate the tension between his roles as a husband and a son. She cherished every moment they spent together, aware that rebuilding had taken both courage and humility. The beauty of rebuilding a bond is that it creates something even stronger than what existed before. The cracks from the past are not erased, but they become part of the story, reminders of what was overcome. Just as a repaired piece of pottery can be more beautiful because of its golden seams, their relationship became more beautiful because of the pain they had endured and healed. Through this process, the mother also healed within herself. She no longer carried the heavy loneliness that once shadowed her days. Instead, she felt surrounded by love from her son, from his wife, and from the family they were building together. Her heart, once fractured, now felt whole. The journey of rebuilding bonds teaches valuable lessons about life and love. It shows that relationships are not perfect. They require constant care, forgiveness, and effort. It reminds us that conflicts, while painful, can also serve as catalysts for growth. And it proves that love, when nurtured, can survive even the deepest wounds. In the end, the mother's relationship with her son was transformed. What started as a painful exclusion became the foundation for a stronger connection. They learned to value each other more, to communicate more openly, and to cherish the time they had together. The painful dinner incident became just one chapter in their story, a chapter that led to a beautiful renewal of their bond. Rebuilding bonds takes time, patience, and love. It requires choosing healing over pride, compassion over resentment, and commitment over avoidance. The mother and son in this story prove that no matter how broken a relationship may seem, it can be rebuilt, not by forgetting the past, but by using it as a stepping stone toward a stronger future. Because at the heart of every strong bond is the willingness to fight for it, even when it's easier to let it break. And when both sides choose to rebuild, the love that emerges is unshakable.